Listen to the radio. Harry and Edna's Wireless Show. You heard it from the Three Bells.
What-o, Harry?
And what-o, Edna, and welcome to Harry and Edna on the Wireless. And this time, well, are there dinosaurs? I feel quite prehistoric.
Well, Harry, I thought we'd just take ourselves back in time, just that little bit further than we're used to.
And we've gone back how many years?
Rather a lot. 950 years, actually.
And is there pterodactyls and tyrannosauruses around here?
No, we've moved on from there. We've moved on from Stone Age man, mammoth, think kind of chainmail battles.
Jesus has been.
Yeah, Jesus, we've been and done Jesus, moved on from Jesus. The Romans have left England now, and there was a sort of stabilising of the English monarchy for a little while anyway.
And the reason being, we should explain, is actually where we said we were at Battle Abbey, and this is the site of the Battle of Hastings, 1066 and all that. Terrifying in the moment. The way people act around here, you think they'll have someone's eye out with all these arrows.
What ho?
If you listen to a previous Harry and Edna show, we were debating whether or not the 1970s were retro. So what on earth is 950 years?
Well, we decided that we would just take a little step out of our comfort zone of the 1940s postal district and go back in time. But we decided if you're going to go back in time, you don't just go a little bit back in time, you go right back in time. And we just decided we'd like to come and see what it was like to live, breathe and see a battle. But no, just not any old battle. Of course, Harry and Edna wouldn't just go and see any old battle. We decided to come and see the pivotal battle in English history, the battle that made the difference, that was the turning point in our history. And so we decided to come and see how they do it old-styley.
Now, we're at an English heritage property, and I should say, I reckon, surely there's somebody around here who can explain it a little bit better than us. So if I play a record, who are you going to go and have a chat to?
I think there's no better person than to go to the man right at the top. So let's go and speak to Neil McCallum, who's the Director of Historic Properties in the South East region.
What ho?
I'm Neil McCollum, Historic Properties Director for the South East for English Heritage. It's probably the most important battle in England ever, to be honest. You know, it's 950 years since the Battle of Hastings, and it's where our history fundamentally changed when William of Normandy overcome Harold's forces, and we became effectively Normans. Our language changed, our culture changed, our laws changed, our feudal system changed. Everything changed at that point, really. So it's a really important part of our history. Well, 950 years is a big number to celebrate, and I think it's important that we, as English heritage, commemorate all these anniversaries. We commemorated 940, but 950 has got a certain cachet to it, shall we say, and we couldn't let it pass without having this amazing reenactment.
What is it that you're doing this year that's different to, say, the 940th reenactment?
I think it's about bigger and better, really. Ultimately, this is about telling people what happened here 950 years ago, explaining what the battle was about, what led up to the battle, what happened after the battle, but also doing it in a fun way so that people can actually enjoy it. So this year, it's about bigger and better, more reenactors. We've gone from maybe having 400 or 500 reenactors to having over 1,000 reenactors on the field, from having maybe a dozen horses to having 3 dozen horses in terms of the cavalry charge, and there are now probably 2,000 reenactors camped out on the battlefield, both on the Norman and on the Saxon side, living history as we speak.
Obviously, you've got more people on the field. Does it create a different feeling for those who are watching it?
I think it does. I mean, actually, watching the Norman charge yesterday, and watching Norman, it was kind of puts shivers on the back of your spine. Really, it's amazing to see it. But actually, when you look across the battlefield, especially at dusk and all the fires are starting up, it just feels like you're actually there. You think you're back in 1066. This is what it would have looked like. Yes, they're a lot closer these days rather than being on opposite hills, but you get that sense of this is what would have happened and what it would have felt like.
So historically, are we on the site?
Yeah, the evidence for this site is fairly overwhelming. Yeah, we are pretty sure this is where the battle happened. Obviously, the battlefield as we have at the moment is only part of the overall battlefield, which extends to hills behind and in front of us as well. But I think being part of that place where it actually happens, stepping into kind of England's history, stepping into that spot, is crucial to actually understanding and appreciating what this is all about.
Do you think it's really important, does English Heritage think it's really important to show people what people dress like, the tactics, the sights and the sounds of Battle?
I think so. You learn by being tactile. You learn by looking at things, by smelling things, by touching things, and speaking firsthand to people who've got an expert in that. So seeing something in a museum is one way of learning, but this is actually more important. You're on the spot. You're seeing people live as they would have lived back in 1066. You've seen them how they fight. You see their armour. You even see what they cook. With authentic food here as well. And I think it's a vital way for people to learn about this amazing date. We've got a lot going on today. I mean, apart from the reenactment itself in terms of the battle, we've also got living history camps, we've got archery demonstrations, we've got a falconry demonstration as well. So we're kind of picking up all of those parts of life in 1066 so people can understand what the whole kind of breadth of lifestyle would have been, not just about the battle itself.
So next to the battle field itself is Battle Abbey. What's the relevance of the Abbey to the battle itself?
Well, the Abbey is where was created by William the Conqueror, and to pay for the sins, shall we say, of all the casualties in the battle. And he wanted to create this amazing Abbey here to actually commemorate what had happened here, to understand the bloodshed that had gone here, and for people to worship and give thanks to God for the Norman victory. So the Battle Abbey here itself is on the site, we believe, of where the battle finished, potentially where Harold fell, which is obviously where the end of the battle, and we certainly feel that the ruins of the Abbey Church are on that site where Harold either fell or was certainly buried after the battle. So it's fairly significant that the Abbey is here on top of the hill.
And is it a complete abbey? There's sort of some very grand buildings in front of us, but I don't think they are part of the actual abbey.
Obviously, what you're seeing here is primarily the 14th century abbey, which is the abbey was obviously first built in the 11th century, but then was heavily adapted over the next 400 years. And so what you hear is a 14th century abbey. In parts, it's complete. The gatehouse behind us is very complete as well. And in front of us, we've got what is now the Battle Abbey School, but was previously the lodgings. And so the buildings are fairly original from the 14th century. Over the far side, we've got the ruins of the chapter house and the dormitory range, and also the ruins of the Abbey Church, which all disappeared as a result of Henry VIII's work. But I think we've still got some fairly complete buildings that have been looked after and maintained over the years. So it gives you an indication of what the Abbey could have looked like, in terms of certainly the footprint anyway. In terms of the buildings, this is our heritage, this is where we've come from, be it Anglo-Saxon, be it Norman, and I think it's vital that we preserve these buildings for future generations, and that's the role of English heritage. And equally, the reenactment, it's not a celebration, it's a commemoration, it's an anniversary, it's an education tool really, and so people understand what happened here 950 years ago and why does it matter today. And of course it matters today. Yes, I know it's a long time ago, but equally a lot of things we take for granted now happened a long time ago, and so it's important that we keep this message going.
Is there lots of other events coming up over the next few weeks and months?
Yeah, our next focus is obviously around the half-term week, which is Halloween, so we do lots of Halloween events at Carisbrooke, Battle Abbey, Dover Castle, Walmer and so on. So there's a great programme of activities at most English heritage sites across the half-term Halloween week. Then we take a little bit of a break because we have a kind of bit of a quiet time going into November, December, and then we have some events around Christmas again, around the Christmas week, and also the period between Christmas and New Year. It's never too late to join English Heritage. Membership's a great value for money. We value the support that our members give us, and it gives you great entry to all of our properties free of charge for the year.
What ho!
Yeah, Rick and Helen Heavysides, we are Hawk Voice musicians, and today it's our job to show the origins of music because it just happens to coincide with the time of the Battle of Hastings.
So for our listeners, can you describe some of the instruments that you would have had back in the day, back in 1066?
Yeah, sure. Like today, there is new technology and there is old technology. The old technology is the stuff of the Romans that's still here nearly 1,000 years later. Things like bells and harps. They're the fundamentals of music. Now, there is the new stuff of the Roman Catholic Church that came into the country. Organostrum, if you speak Latin, symphony, if you speak Frankish, cymbal, which is the name that we seem to adopt in this country. And basically there, you're talking about a wooden box, which may be, 4 or 5 feet long, got the pitch of a cello with strings in it, and there's a wheel that rubs on the strings. So basically it's a mechanical violin, and the idea is that it aids the singing of Gregorian chant in a Norman monastery post 1066. They're the new musical instruments that come with the Normans.
And why would they have come up with the idea for these instruments? Was there a reason? Did somebody kind of hear a tune and a sound and think, actually I can expand that and turn that into an instrument? Or sort of what are the origins of why these instruments existed to begin with?
Well, the concept tune, you see, that implies a certain type of music that we think of today. When you actually listen to 11th century music or even 12th century music, Tune, well, that's sort of like overstating the thing a bit. You know, we're still at the level of meanderings of notes up and down that are in a pleasing way rather than an actual tune. It's difficult to do. And it's hard to keep pitch, it's difficult to sing, so consequently you need a musical instrument so you can keep pitch and you can know the intervals between the notes. So the musical instruments themselves don't actually do very much. If you ask me to play a tune on a musical instrument, well, you know, you're a bit hard pushed to do it because they're not sophisticated enough really to cope with that. What they do is allow people who sing to stay at pitch and help them with intervals. That's what musical instruments really do from this time of history.
So looking at the instrument behind you with the strings and with how would you develop that as an instrument?
Well, in about the 1490s, which is a long way ahead, the Italians took that church musical instrument, redesigned it and came up with the hurdy-gurdy. And hurdy-gurdy is a very sophisticated musical instrument, but it's in its infancy here.
And what kind of people would have played it? Would you have specific, we call them musicians today?
Well, music in the 11th century, I'm sure somebody will find some somewhere, but I have not come across secular music from the 11th century. I know some secular music from the 12th century, and when you come to dance music, well, you're talking 13th century there. So, you know, you've got to remember you're looking at the very origins of written music here, so you don't expect there to be yards of it.
And as you said earlier, that was really all born through Gregorian Church.
Yeah, through the church, exactly, yes.
And so, taking your instruments that you've got here for us today, say, for example, the harp.
Yeah.
Would you have had to have been skilled to play the harp? Is it something that was passed from generation to generation? Would you have gone somewhere specifically to learn it? Is it something you learn through family members?
Well, the only instrument and music schools I know of come later in history. But there is a concept of bards, to use a Celtic description there, bards playing harps. But you see, the time that people play harps before 1066 in the bardic tradition, well, when you look at the harps, you know, you've got a thing with 3 or 4 strings on it, that's it. So, again, this is a matter of opinion, but I'm not the only one that thinks this way. What you actually do with a harp, previous to 1066, is not play music. You tell a story. Now, even the Romans themselves said what is important in art is the words. Music has no importance, because they're not really up to it. It's not sophisticated enough then for them to even see the value of it. It's the story that matters. So you have a harp in your lap with 3 or 4 strings, you tell a story, and when you get to the lovey-dovey bit of the story, you pluck the strings in a lyrical fashion. There's no way you would do it twice the same, or you'd read music to do it. You'd just make a sound effect that suited the love element. And then when it got to the battle or the fierce monster, that Beowulf was fighting, whatever, then you would thrash about on it and you would make sound effects to suit the story. Now, again, this is a subjective opinion I'm telling you here, but I promise you I'm not the only one that sees it this way, I promise.
And moving on to your bells that you've got there,
Yep.
And they are different heights. Is that again for...
No, height's not really an issue here. They're just arranged so that one human being in the middle can reach them all with ease. You'll notice some are bigger, some are small. Big things make low sounds, little things make high sounds. So they are arranged on Guido's scale of notes, that 10, 20, that's what the whole show was about.
And again, what would this have been an accompaniment to?
Voice. Everything is an accompaniment to the voice. That's the most important thing. Voice.
And that's voice in church?
As I said, I don't know of any secular music from the 11th century. So you tell me.
And what sort of tune do they make for our listeners to hear?
Well, I can bong them for you. I mean, basically, you just do the same as with most music these days and have fifths. But third sounds good too. Or major. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess in a church environment that would have been an incredible sound, just echoing.
Exactly. I mean, bear in mind that people at this time in history, the loudest thing they've ever heard is a cow going moo. So this is amazing to them.
What ho?
Well, I'm still at Battle Abbey with lots of people here waiting to see the main battle. But I should explain, you get the chance to listen to Harry and Edna on the wireless by various means. I'm sure you're listening to one right now, else you wouldn't be hearing my voice. But you can go to, Harry and Edna on the wireless is available by podcast, internet streaming, FM and internet radio. And alternatively, you can hear the entire back catalogue simply by going to harryandedna.co.uk and clicking on the tab that says wireless.
What ho?
Starting with yourself, what is it like to sort of be here in an encampment reenacting somebody who would have been here at the time?
Well, we find that it's quite exciting. It's quite interesting being on the actual ground where people may have died, or fought, and you're fighting for your country, and you do find that you do sort of get a feeling, a sense of how it might have been. The only find that we can't reenact is we find it difficult to reenact the actual fear. You can reenact the fight, you can reenact dying, but you can't reenact the fear that you would have of watching your husband and your children going out to fight for their lives. And that's hard to do. But we do really enjoy what we do. And we find that it's a great community to get a chance to get all together and to show what we do to the public and do some training as well. That's great. Okay, what we're standing under right now is an awning. This would have been made out of the sail of our ship. So it's a overhead and back structure with no sides or front, and it's a basic tent, and this would have been the first thing that you'd have been able to put up, because you'd have used your awning from your sail of your ship to create the basic overhead sort of protection of a structure, a bit like a modern gazebo. And the staves, the sticks that we use, would have been oars from the actual ship themselves. So you're utilising what you already had to quickly make a shelter, and then from there you go from there with making your fire and building what you have. In reenactment, because we're on English heritage ground and soil, which is obviously an archaeological site, we can't dig a fire pit, which would have been what the Vikings did. They would have dug down and moved the turf and made a fire pit into the ground. So reenactors use fire boxes, which are lifted off the ground. So it's the same sort of size and shape and idea, but we can't dig into the ground because we don't want to disturb archaeological evidence. So that's one difference that we do have to sort of sacrifice, I suppose. But the other items that we've got a large table behind us with food items on, typical food and herbs of the time. We've got garlic, we've got chicken, peas, apples, carrots, raspberries and strawberries, pepper and salt, linseed flax, clover, dandelion, and we would make soup with nettle and onion as well, turnip. And yesterday we cooked a lamb, but you've missed that, unfortunately.
So would you have brought some of this food over with you, or is this these items that you found and foraged whilst you've been travelling?
Okay, well, we've travelled down from Stamford Bridge, which is up in Yorkshire, where we've just done two really big battles, the Battle of Fulford and the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which was against a Viking army that had come over with Harold Hardrada. We were victors at that battle, we won, so we've then had to march back down south to try and head off William, who's come over to take the throne. So we're Saxons, so we're coming from England anyway, and these are typical foods that were found at the time in the UK. And most of the foods that we would have had here in Hastings we would have had to find locally. Very little would have travelled well with us. It takes us 3 weeks to march down, so very little could have been brought with us. It would have been basically taken off farms and villages as we travelled.
So the lamb you have there, would that have lasted you one day, or is that several days worth?
When they made a stew, they would often they would cook a joint of meat or a stew, and then they would add to it every day. So we would sort of maybe keep it for a day, 2 days, and then in modern times we throw that away. The Vikings didn't do that. They didn't know so much about health and bacteria and so on. So they would add to their stew with whatever and create a big pottage, and we'd put the chicken in with the lamb, and we'd create a big stew out of that, and constantly be feeding other people. So we did have some quite interesting stomach disorders.
And some of the other items you've got are made out of wood, and you've got pottery there. Again, would these have been localised items, or would you have, sort of as you've travelled and as you've marched, would you have picked some of them up from different markets as you came down south?
Okay, well, the Vikings are great traders, and we also a bit of a magpie in that we love the shiny things and we love anything interesting and different. So they would have indeed collated things as they went along, maybe swapped, bartered, traded, and probably stolen quite a lot of the items. Some of them would be handmade, so you would have the skill, you would have the knowledge to maybe turn a bowl and bring a bowl with you. You probably would have had your own bowl and spoon, perhaps even tied to your belt with a basic eating knife as well. No forks, obviously. And we do indeed make this and bring this with us, but the Vikings would have travelled very simply. They probably wouldn't have had a lot of this. They probably would have just had maybe a spoon and a bowl if they were lucky. A lot of food was just ate from the hand with a piece of bread.
So sort of moving into the evening now, it is quite basic. Well, it is very basic living accommodation. Would you have been warm enough? I'm assuming you would have been warm enough. You'd have had furs to keep you warm. What's it like for yourself as a modern woman sleeping out here, out in the field? Do you get quite cold?
It's funny you should say that. Usually I'm colder on the first night when we've come in our modern camping kit. Once we've got our full length, ankle length woolen dress, which has also got an underdress of linen as well, and I'm wearing a double cloak, which is a square cloak made out of 2 woolen blankets, so you're wearing 3 layers of wool and a layer of linen, and it's full length. It goes from collar to cuff and from ankle to neck, so you are totally covered and warm. You'd wear woolen socks as well in this climate. We have woolen socks, and we're lucky enough to wear leather boots as well. So, as you can hear in the background, the battle's about to start, so everyone's getting very excited. But yes, funnily enough, I'm actually warmer sleeping with my reindeer fleece and my sheepskin and my goat blanket in my canvas tent than I am in my modern plastic tent.
So, moving on to our warrior, would you call yourself warrior?
Makeshift warrior, yeah.
So how do you feel when you're on a site like this preparing to go to battle?
I think there's a mixture of feelings. Before the battle, when the muster starts, when the gathering of the troops and you can hear the chainmail being put on, the swords clashing, the cheer of Godwinson, the adrenaline takes over the reenactment, because believe it or not, it's like if you're actually going to a real battle. Yeah. And you're marching for king and country, and once you're on the battlefield and you see the Normans line up, the crowd line are oblivious, because you know that once the advancing army comes, although it's reenactments, accidents can still happen. The horse charge, you can feel the ground trembling because they come that close to you. And when the Saxons die, when we're part of the Saxons, and after the battle's over, you can't help but lie there under your shield thinking, this is where the real battle took place. Did someone else fall here? And it's quite a chilling feeling. And once all the public's gone home and everything's gone quiet and the reenactors come to life, we don't just put everything away and go revert back to normal. We still carry on with the Saxon way of life. And sometimes if you get up 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see a mist covering the battlefield and the tents, and it's quite eerie. But yes, I think when you're getting ready to go on to the battle, it really does feel that you are going into battle, and it's such an adrenaline rush.
I know you can't recreate the fear, but do you get that little sense of what it must have felt like?
No, I mean, on the contrary, for example, yesterday we'd formed the Saxon shield wall, and we have so many waves of attack. The first wave may be archers. Now we know the archers are not going to shoot us, so we can cover ourselves up. But when the advancing cavalry come, and you're standing there in a shield wall and you see 50 horses galloping at you, and they're getting closer and closer and closer, and then you can see the chest of this huge beast coming at you. For a slight second, you anticipate, are they going to turn? Is the horse going to flip the rider and come straight through the wall? But because of the skillful, the riders, they're so skillful and trained that they can turn them horses within a foot of your feet, and your heart's pumping, your blood's pumping, and then they'll ride past you clashing swords. And I think for that 45 minutes or an hour's battle, you actually forget that you're a modern man, but you appreciate that you are a modern man. Because for saying, say, if I would have been a real Saxon or a real Viking, I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can remember the first battle I was ever in, I was killed. And each time we die, we can get back up. So it gives you a sense of, we're lucky to be alive. Yeah. So yes, it gives you a good adrenaline rush.
And do you look forward to recreating the battle every year?
I think it's an hard question, because when I was younger, I enjoyed the battles because it's like, where's my sword, where's my chain, I want to get into battle. But then we discovered the living history side of it, the encampment side of it, and this is just as important, because without this, without the food being brought, the battles or the troops couldn't march. So although I love to fight, I like to pick my battles, which battles I go into. But I do look forward to the Battle of Hastings.
What ho?
Well, time has beaten us again, which is quite ironic when you're 950 years ago. Time is flying by. In fact, any moment now it might be the Renaissance period, and we might all have to start painting. But before that happens, it's time for me to say toodle pip.
And an arrow in the eye from me.